every athlete, every person, every human being has an opportunity. Some opportunities don't come when you want them. But if you're prepared, good opportunities can happen. Always be ready, because you never know when your number is going to get called.
I'm not coming back.
Emmy Apparel. Encourage me. I'm young.
Calvin T. Mann, leading Emmy, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to Emmy TV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
Good afternoon. I'm all alone. I noticed that this chair was empty. And it's okay. Everything's going to be all right. Welcome to METV, where I'm your host. Excuse the napkin. I was sitting here wiping off the sweat because it was hotter than a giraffe's ankle in this facility. My wife, she's sneaking in Kleenex, y'all. Right. Anyway, today is welcome to Put Your Family First podcast. We got a guest from Florida. And we're going to get right into this today. What's special about today? Today is Boys Matter, so we get to have a conversation around the importance of our boys. You know, that's one of my subjects. Boys, men, husbands, and fathers, families, women, children, all alike. I am not biased. I'm equal. But one thing's for sure. I don't leave out the men. And for all of you that is comfortable with that, you might won't get comfortable with me talking about the boys, the men, the husbands, and fathers. With that being the case, good afternoon, Heather.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Just because I went to pick up some papers, okay.
It's okay. We missed you. It was like we started the show a half hour ago and you came back. Right. If you can merge in our guest today is Clifford Starks from Florida. The brother has the fighter's formula. How you doing, Brother Clifford?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing real good.
Awesome.
We're glad you can make it. Normally, I try to keep the jokes at a limit. All right, but when guests come in the house, we want to make sure that we welcome the guests with laughter because it's important. Heather,
I love it.
Would you have something you'd like to say right now?
Oh, and you're talking getting in the topic? So, Clifford, hello. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Heather. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So we are kind of blending in our conversation today around Boys Matter. And I wanted to kind of start off with some information that I found around where boys begin and this journey that, and it was an unfortunate phrase that they used today when I was doing a little more research, digging a little bit deeper on where the idea of daycare and childcare and preschool and nursery schools, kind of where that concept came from. And so we tried to, frame our conversation as we start off with the topic of the day to kind of frame it so that as we move forward in the conversation, we can kind of tie it all together to some concepts that are usable for families, that are understandable, and that kind of connect. So I kind of start off this conversation with some of the research that I do.
So before you get that far, Clifford, you got more than 30 minutes? Because we got to check. I know you got that tight schedule. And
yeah, I got about 35.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Clifford, we'll let you then go first, and I'll just follow up my my research after you share about you and your program.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I have the fighter's formula. I call it winning in life and business, because as we go through our journey, the most important thing we want is the result. You know, when it comes down to the nitty gritty of things. And as I've gone through my process, I've realized, there are ways to get the result in a faster, less friction, or more of a frictionless way as we go through our process. And so I support others in doing the same thing. And as Calvin's talking about the men, the boys, it's so true. You know, to have the right men in your life is going to make your life a heck of a lot easier.
Right.
And if you don't know who to follow or what to follow, you follow whatever you see. And I was blessed because I had two specific men in my life. One actually drove out of my life. Another drove into my life. And I got to see both sides of the coin. I got to see what happens when you don't have someone to follow, and I got to see what happens when you do have someone to follow. And so I really, really became intentional with who was doing what and what that was teaching me along the way. And now I do the same to support others in their journey on, well, what are you following? Why are you following it? Is it actually giving you the result that you want, or is it making your life harder at the end of the day?
And when did you start your journey? How old were you?
My conscious journey, I was 4 years old. My dad drove out of my life. I remember him leaving and saying to myself, people who are supposed to be there can leave. Like that's part of the game. And from there, I actually had 4, 5, and 6 were major shifts in my life. Because at 5, my grandfather passed away. And at 6, my mom actually remarried a guy that I call dad to this day. And so I kind of went into the frame of, okay, people who are supposed to be there can just leave. People who don't have to be there can stay, and we're all going to die. So make the best out of your journey as you're going through the process.
Wow, and you got it that early in life, huh? That's amazing. Yeah. But you know what? It really validates the information I'm going to share when you're done sharing with your story, because we're talking about where it begins, and the evidence from this particular one of the resources that I'm using. They refer to this journey, especially for Black boys, as preschool to pipeline. They actually referred to it that way, and kind of where some of the things started, where this whole process about daycare and all those things started. So I think it's really gonna tie in well to your story and your journey. I'm so glad that you started at that point. That we tend to think that our kids don't remember what it's like to be 3 and 4 years old and what you've seen and witnessed. I had somebody, a client, tell me that he remembered his journey from age 2. He remembered seeing his mom. His mom was in an abusive relationship, and he remembered her, walking outside the door and walking across the street. And she told him to keep her eye on him, to stay at the window and keep watching her. And the abuser for both of them was still in the house, and she was trying to keep an eye, I guess, while she was trying to get help and get some support to help them get out of the house. And the person that was abusing both of them ended up abusing him while he was standing there at the window. So he was scarred for life behind that, and it just changed his whole understanding of life. But he remembered that at age 2.
Yeah, we can be very, very cruel early on. It could be a lot of damage done. It's a lot of damage done, and it becomes a model for which we have to stop. Right, we got to get out of this space of misunderstanding that because you and I can't get along doesn't mean we can't raise a healthy child. We got to get out of that space.
Right. I mean, and that, you know, that pours into ACEs too.
Yeah.
Adverse childhood.
But the average household in an abusive situation doesn't even know what ACEs is.
I understood.
Right. They ain't picked up a book since middle school. You know what I mean? Like it's really a tough thing. So at this point, Cliff, like, what got you started? When did you start applying the Fighters program?
You know, that's a great question. And strangely enough, it was something that I was applying since I was young. Now I know the sequence and the steps and the process and what to look for. It's a game of awareness at the end of the day. But I started applying it right when I was 4. You know, I had a decision to make. I had a choice when my biological drove away. And my choice was, I'm going to be strong no matter what. I'm going to do the things that I need to do no matter what. And everything is a choice at the end of the day. Like, and some people, they don't even know they have a choice, but they say, when does a fish know that it's out of the water? Well, when it's actually out of the water, it doesn't even know that it is in water.
I was going to say when it's baked.
Yeah, that's another time when it really knows that it's been in the water at that entire time too. That's very true. But I look at it and I say, like, every moment, every day, every time your feet touch the ground, you have a choice. And some of those choices we might not like, but when we take our power back, just as Calvin, you mentioned earlier on, we're going to talk about the men, we're going to talk about the boys. We're all in this together. And sometimes I think we can forget that and say, well, no, we got to talk about this problem, not this over here. Well, that's like saying, okay, I have a broken arm, but I'm not going to eat nutritionalists. I'm not going to eat nutritional food because I got to focus on this arm right here. Right. No, it's always focusing on the whole. This is a holistic game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's no question. That's why we drive the lane, boys. That's why I'm constantly, boys, become a man, we just had this conversation at the pancake breakfast. The man becomes a husband and a husband becomes a father. If we can establish order, you can eradicate disorder, right? The fact that we wallow in disorder is very destructive to the family and the children. And that's where our brand, right? If we just looking at it from a cultural perspective, our brand is flawed in that perspective, because having children out of order creates more disorder. So how long you been at this Fighters program, the work that you do, right? Because I know we were introduced by my man out of California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I officially put it together. It was funny. I have a personal training background. I was an overweight kid, ended up losing the weight, getting into athletics. Started training, and then I got into fighting, fought in the UFC, fought in Bellator, retired in 2017. So I started speaking, and I also got certified as a coach in 2018. And when I spoke, I really had to get the foundations of what did what to get to the result. And so in 2018, that's when I put it together. It was actually called The Power of Six when I first put it together.
Right. And
I rebranded it and I changed it. This was, I want to say 2022. So it's actually relatively new. I called it the Fighter's Formula because it aligned with what it is that I do. I go fight for my dreams. I go fight. It was really interesting because even though I could fight for my dreams, I tried fighting for other people's dreams.
Right.
And Calvin, I heard you speak about something about having children do their chores. And what's so interesting about that, it's everybody needs to do their chores, because when they do it, they respect it differently. Something about them changes.
Yes.
And I stopped fighting for people's dreams, and I started teaching others how to fight for theirs.
That's important, right? That falls into the line of being a mentor, a father. That's part of that fatherhood value. We hear the kids in the background, right? That's part of that fatherhood value, right? That fatherhood value says that I'm responsible for more than just mine. Fatherhood value reaches outside of his door and taps on the neighbor's door and taps on the neighbor's door and taps, right? It's always in a position to make a difference. It is the individual mindset that doesn't pour into the children within reach of their children, which creates a single identity, which again creates more disorder. Then you find our children and ourselves in positions where you're not the lead, you really end up the follow. And that is the problem with today's society when it comes to boys, when it comes to men, when it comes to husbands, when it comes to fathers. We all have to look out for each other. I think that's just really, really important in this fighter's formula that we have, right? I think that's important. In teaching people, I was just dealing with a mentee today, and in teaching him to understand that the way you're going about this, you're not getting that dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen, right? Because you're not taking the steps to even move near it. Like there are some things that you have to do as a mentor, and it doesn't, and a person, and a coach, and a life coach. Some of those tough conversations literally tap into the poor parenting that you didn't, that parenting that you didn't get, the quality parenting, where your parents are telling you, you failed here. Here's how you can succeed. Now you got to make that decision, like you say, have a choice. But it's also just so important as parents that we teach accountability and responsibility and those things. We can't teach victimhood and blaming and all of that. No, we got to. It's a lot more things we got to teach, because those other things lead to that pipeline. So I know you got to go. I'm glad you jumped on. Right, we can do this again, and make sure you email us your website, but tell everybody where they can reach you at.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you, and it was a pleasure. Is your name Kelly?
Calvin. You got Calvin and Heather.
Yeah, so I know Calvin, Heather. Okay, yeah. Right. Heather, it was a pleasure meeting you as well.
Thank
I look
you.
forward to hearing about the statistics and the information that you have to provide. For me, you can reach me on my Facebook Messenger. You can also reach me on LinkedIn at Clifford Starks. And I have a quiz link, and I'll send that to you, Calvin.
Okay.
But the quiz goes over, are you a fighter? Are you a warrior? Are you adaptive? Or are you a civilian? This is for business owners specifically who want to get in touch with the internal game, because it's more of an internal game than an external game. I believe it was Socrates. He says, know thyself. And that is absolutely the truth. When you know where you're strong and where you're weak, double down on your strengths, find those who can support you in your weaknesses. So that's the game that I've been playing as I've been going through my journey. And Calvin, again, I appreciate you for having me on.
Oh man, anytime. We gonna do this again, and I appreciate you, man. Enjoy that fatherhood. This your first one?
Second, yeah. So I got 2 kids, 7 and 3.
Welcome to the
And
hood.
wow, the lessons never stop.
Welcome to the hood. They never. But your kids are winning with you being present in their lives, and I thank you for that. If you go to Good Fathers Only, we accepting free memberships right now too, Cliff. And
Awesome.
Surrounding fathers with resources and support in their communities where they live. So thank you, brother.
Respect. All right, you guys have an amazing day. Appreciate you.
You as well.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, we got an intermission. Dun, 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 dun. All right.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I had more questions.
Yeah. But I know he be on that timeline.
Yeah, I understand. Because I can get a little bit more wordy than...
Uh-oh. That's new. We'll take that.
No, it's not new. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about. I really want to start here. I'm going to talk about the information I found on the origin of child care centers. And so I'm going to read from a report called "Transforming the Workforce from Birth Through Age 8."
Woo! Why you gonna start there?
Because this was so this is a 707-page study that I'm pulling this information from.
Right. So before we get knee deep in that, like the prevent preschool. Okay, it's your show. Go ahead.
That's right. We're not going to supersede.
Go ahead. It's your show. I didn't want to get this information out anyway. Like this in house.
No, so I just wanted to, because I thought it was really interesting when I found this information, that child care centers were established in the United States primarily to provide
Calvin Tune
for
leading
young children while their parents were at work. Child care centers, okay? Child care practices are historically grounded more in public health and child protection traditions than education. That, to me, that kind of blew my mind a bit. Because when you think about child care centers, so I worked for a child care learning center. And our youngest child there was 3 months old. So they started at 3 months and they ended at age 8. And they had after school programs before and after school care. And the center that I was a director over. And I wanted to understand more about it because my background wasn't around early childhood. It was really around doing the management administrative work that I was doing. But when I understood the difference, like there was a curriculum for every age group that was in our facility. So the 3-month-old had their own curriculum. So it was a curriculum that the instructors had to follow, and it was very, very intense, even for a 3-month-old baby, a newborn. And so the more time I spent there, the more I understood. So that's why this information really stood out to me and was important, and especially starting with the child care. So this is another interesting, the origin of nursery schools. It says children attending nursery schools were primarily from middle and upper class families. The aim was to nurture children's social, emotional, physical, intellectual, and their intellectual development. And nursery school teachers were responsible for engaging children in activities that align with their interests and provided opportunities for their creative expression, for work projects, and the natural use of materials. That was really the purpose of nursery schools. Another fact that was interesting, that it was really for those parents who understood. Now, it's not talking about working parents. It's talking about an intentional place for your children to go and be socialized, for your children to go to have intellectual stimulation. And it was my understanding that they all were supposed to be that. And that was, I guess that was just my thought around child care and nursery schools. But here's another one, the final one that I want to share with you is about kindergarten. It says, in its early history in the United States, kindergarten, funded through philanthropy, was primarily intended to provide classroom learning, health services, home visits, and other assistance to children living in poverty and their families. It says, originally it functioned as a transition between home-based care and formal schooling and focused on play, self-expression, social cooperation, and independence. It says the original emphasis was on development in social and emotional domains over time. kindergarten began to also incorporate content-based learning as well as math and literacy skills. Like, it didn't even start off to be that.
Yeah, but they shifted, right? Because
For sure.
they shifted with juvenile. Remember, juvenile was supposed to really be almost the same thing, right? And then it became a way to create more, right, prisoners. So the pipeline, like I said, on many occasions starts at the womb.
So the interesting thing about the daycare, the nursery school, the kindergarten, the interesting thing about this, now remember, this study is about the workforce. So originally, I'm going to talk more about how preschool is more seen as from preschool to pipeline. Initially, these other forms of educational supports were from preschool to workforce. So they started out developing workers and managers, and it was clear, based on the three descriptions of their original purposes, that they were trying to build a workforce. And so now, as we shift years later, we're looking at education and its impact on driving, especially black males, to pipeline versus driving them to the workforce. And so that's a really interesting, dynamic to consider. And what choices we have as parents, and I'm so glad Clifford talked about choices, that every time you put your foot on the ground, every time you're able and gifted with life to wake up that next day or to wake up, you have an opportunity to make a new choice. And so I always like to frame our conversations, because I think it's important for parents to know that we have a choice. We have a choice in what's happening with our children. We have a choice to be involved. We have a choice to change the direction that our children's lives are headed, even our lives. We have choices. And so the better choices and the more information we have to make better choices, the better choices we can make. And so it's a couple other things that I want to share, but I just wanted to kind of start off framing like the origin and the difference of where we are now in terms of our origin, and the differences of where this process originally started. So one, it was based on the class separation. It was based on socialization. It was based on and it was based on an intention to move people from birth to work. And now we're seeing that with the investment or lack thereof, that we're moving people in a different direction.
Well, so last night when I was doing the research on a certain Republican Party, right, in education, education began to take a hit, right? First, it was back to the basics, right? Back to the basics was Ronald Reagan. So you got to remember, 69, no fault divorce, here come the same guy, decides they're back to the basics, right? And some level, they said back to the basics was equalizing in education. That somehow the minorities and the whites, the field became level, right? Which then, when you read further on, back to the basics was nothing but taking away the strengths from the schools and the education. So the schools depleted the programs, right? So when you talk about the pipeline, right, because what I've been saying, we kick black boys out of daycares, right? So if the black boy is removed 4 times from education and we kicking them out of daycares, who are we assisting when we open up a daycare and we can't handle the black boy? Or the family can't bring in the child where the child can be. We are literally assisting the pipeline. It doesn't take rocket science to understand that. From what you're saying is from, birth to 8. what we've been saying is we picking them up at 8 to 14. We get ready to make that pivot. What we're saying is getting ahead of it allows to strengthen the family, to produce a healthy young man that could become someone's man, husband, or father. Because right now, we got our young men underdeveloped in every area of education. And the only area where a young man is developing that you find more and more and more is when there is a healthy fatherhood or male involvement, which is why so many young men are in sports, because that's another place where they can get male involvement. Now, the males that's involved with sports, are they healthy? Not necessarily, right? You got to understand that the guys that's volunteering their time, it's not too much you can say, but you can force some trainings on them, get them to understand not to do certain things, right? So the child can have a healthy outcome. But back to what you were saying, because I'm very interested in this next sheet, right? I'm excited about getting to this next sheet because you know me like you know your hands, so let's get it.
So I found another article, and this is kind of a focus on one of Focus Hope's early learning centers. It talked about as of
that's my brother.
In 2019,
Brother Wayman.
It says fewer than 3% of preschool and kindergarten teachers were men, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. But our Focus Hope's program, and if you are familiar with that program, you know that they have a lot of success in their early childhood programs. But one of the, I guess, when we're talking about the secret sauce of fatherhood, like our mentoring, it says they have 40% of black men as teachers in their program.
Yep.
40%. And so it says that might make a difference. It
Well,
suggests that it's making a difference because of the amount of success that they're having.
It's no question that it makes a difference, right? It's no question. We know that. Proceed, please.
All right, so I just wanted to pull that out because I thought that was a really significant point. And then when I did some research on what's happening here in Detroit, and this was from 2022, says there are just 438 licensed child care centers in the city of Detroit for ages 0 to 5. It says of those, 291 are home-based centers limited to working with 12 children or less. I thought that was a really interesting point. And then another statistic, so when we were talking about earlier about the workforce, that the child care centers were provided to have a place so that parents could go to work.
That sounds like opportunity.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so it also stated that in 2020, more than 800,000 women across the nation left the workforce within 1 month. In 2020, 800,000 women across the nation left the workforce.
Right, that was COVID.
Definitely that was COVID. But what is that saying? What is that saying? That some of those women went into entrepreneurship. Some of those women went into the spaces that some women may not have occupied at that time.
They're back.
And so one of the things that we found was that in this another article, it said that 96% of the providers in Detroit are women, and most of those providers are black and brown women. So what does that say about our child care learning centers? We know, one, you've seen success from Focus Hope, and they have 40% black and brown men as the teachers. And now we find that there are lots more women that own daycare and child care centers, so that there is a need for, I'm just suggesting that there is a need for balance. And as we start to look for that balance, how do we continue to encourage it? I'm not familiar with any of the daycare centers that are run specifically by black men and or have a high population of black men. If our listeners out there, I would love for you to send that information to us. You can send it to our email address, please, info@emmyworld.com. If you know about Black daycare centers that are run by males, fathers, please share that information with us so we can help lift them up. And of course, we can help, those women who have daycare centers and are working with our boys in particular to help them to make those important connections with other male educators.
I'm afraid to say this, and I'm going to say it. Every day we hustling. You yourself told the story about the one that was doing the program, and she was more concerned about everything being there because she had that Mercedes-Benz parked out there. Mm-hmm. It's about the work for the culture, people. Some things you do to improve. That's why he has 40%, because he understands it's the work for the culture. He would do that if he was out of that building. That is something that, what you just said about the numbers speaks volumes to why the boys are messed up.
Well, let's say that they don't have all the nutrients that they need. I wouldn't say that,
if you 4 times kicked out of the daycare, mm-hmm. and there are 291, and all 291 are women-led. It don't take a mathematician, a scientist, right? It's a tough, because the other issue is that the men bought into hustling themselves. So they're out trying to get the short, quick, fast, in a hurry, because that's what everything tell them. So they gamble their freedom from their families and the community. They gamble that, right? Because I got to impress everybody, right? I got to be dressed to the nines, all this. That's why you don't see me get caught up in all of that, right? Because it's just so important. So like I was just saying, to me, that sounds like opportunity. And when you hear that, because I'm out here, I've not heard of a
daddy daycare
at all.
Outside of the movie, anyway.
Right.
But it's not to say that it doesn't exist. That's why I was asking for anybody that knows of them to please
They
share
told
the
me, I asked several times, is there where we can do a daycare for boys only? And I was told no.
Right? Not with public funds.
I was told no.
But that doesn't mean it can't happen with private funds.
Okay, well, we need to find, because I'm telling you, this movement started in a daycare in 1992. I was given Encourage Me, I'm Young while working in a daycare. Isn't that ironic?
Mm-hmm. Like you and I both have experience in that space, which is another reason why why our work is leading us into this early childhood space. So I did want to share a few more things. So this is an article from July 2022. It talks about expulsions and how really the early expulsions also have a major impact on what happens with our boys. So it talks about, let's see. So one of the quotes is, "This is way more common than most people realize. It's incredibly common for young children 3 and 4 years old to be expelled and suspended from childcare," says Maddie Elliott, Policy and Program Associate for Michigan's Children, a Lansing-based advocacy organization. It says kids in daycare are 13 times more likely to be expelled than kids in K through 12 schools. Kids in daycare are 13 times more likely to be expelled.
Okay, now do 13 times 4 for the black boy.
Wait, I'm not done.
Woohoo!
I'm not done.
My God.
But this is the impact. This is the mental health trauma of experiencing expulsion at such a young age can impact children throughout school and beyond. These kids quickly conjure images of themselves as being bad, as failures in the school setting, and as less than their peers.
Now, guess what they hearing from the parent on the other side? He's bad. Oh, he's bad. They're on the phone. Girl, he over here being bad with this. You know, he just don't know. You know, he falling out. He just, woo.
So, and speaking of that, it also says when a child is expelled at a young age, it really gives them a bad first encounter with education in general. Elliot says it can also lead to kids stigmatizing themselves or thinking of themselves as bad students. That can really set them up for failure and not having a positive relationship with teachers in the future.
And guess what happens? You ready on the other side of this? The boy, he gets nurtured in the school.
Get the last one, Calvin.
Even more troubling, preschool and daycare centers are most likely to expel little black boys. A U.S. Department of Education study shows that black children are 3.6 times more likely to be expelled in preschool than their white peers. And bad behavior may not be the reason. Teachers, caregivers, and peers often have subconscious bias that lead to more suspensions and expulsions for boys of color. If you don't understand, why you do this today?
No. So this is the next part of that information. It says we live in a society that holds white supremacist and anti-black views. These are embedded for all of us from very early on.
Come on.
None of us are immune. We know from research that even really young children make different attributions between race and perceived threats of aggression. Just Catherine Rosenbaum.
Woo!
And this is, she's the co-director of the University of Michigan's Zero to Thrive program. She says, we also know that adults are more likely to perceive black children as less innocent and more culpable. And they tend to perceive black children as older than they are. It says, this was another piece that I thought was really interesting. It says sometimes these children are young black boys who are tall. Their parents will say, they have really unrealistic expectations for my child because he's taller, bigger than average. That implicit bias perceives black boys as more of a threat, more aggressive, especially if they look older than they are, all of which contributes to perceiving behavior differently. If we see the behavior as aggressive, we are less likely to be thinking about what is it that child needs.
So, when I was preaching not too long ago that this system has symptoms, this fit right into what I was
saying. It does, I know. Right?
And so the prescription, man, the prescription for this, the solution to this, the antidote to this. Oh yeah, I appreciate the motivation. I didn't need another log, but I'll take it. It'll keep the fire burning. You know what I mean? Like, this is right here in Michigan. And guess what? You can't say you don't have it, because you got the same symptoms of racism as a racist person toward your own kind. Woohoo! Man, what a thought process for a little black boy to have to walk into a classroom or a daycare, right? And the point I was getting ready to make to you is when he hit the high school level, because he's so damaged from that, he's always sent to the one teacher who will nurture him. and then they pass them on. And so what you find is when they get to a certain level, now the conversation is GED. He's not going to make it. And guess what number that's pulled from? Highly that number is pulled from. That 70% single household. The very thing that you want to try to deny that doesn't have an issue has the biggest issue in the game. You try to deny that. And you keep driving fathers, and fathers keep abusing. Like, we got to stop that because we are the system feeder.
We are.
We're feeding this system. It's a booby trap outside the door. There's a bear trap. As soon as I open up the door, there's a bear trap. I know that bear trap is there. Here, let me move that bear trap out my way. So when I walk out the door, I don't put my foot in the bear trap. How do I do that? I make sure that my son can read. I make sure that my son is stable and can sit still and perform in class like everybody else. I make sure my son ain't not told he's bad. I make sure my son is given the proper ingredients. I make sure the father of the kid understands how important he is to be in his life. I make sure of these things. For you, man, woo! Mm-hmm. So then when you get into all these other areas, what I say, oh, you got an easy out. Guess what that easy out is? I can turn and always pivot and say, he didn't have his father. What an amazing privilege that we have. Or, she won't let me. While we sit up on our parents or our mothers and when it comes time to raise the child and the community and how we look out the door and we say, well, you can't hang around with them, right? Or you can't do this.
So thank you, Calvin. I know this is your trigger spaces here, but I do want to talk a little bit about ACEs. So ACEs are considered, it's an acronym, ACE. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so some of those adverse childhood experiences, I'm going to give you some of the ones that they have on.
You only got a couple minutes too.
I know.
Okay. Abuse,
neglect. So abuse being physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Neglect being emotional neglect and physical neglect. Household dysfunction including substance abuse, parental divorce, household mental illness, mother treated violently, incarcerated household members. These are just some of the symptoms of ACEs and the impact that it has, right? So the number of these impacting circumstances, we are calling it trauma a lot now. So the number of traumas that you face increase your chances of the impact of ACEs, which means that it can, if we're not putting systems and work in shifting the dynamic of our trauma, healing our trauma, whether we're starting at childhood or if you are already in adulthood and already a parent, if we don't put effort into healing those adverse experiences, we continue to perpetuate them and we shorten not only our own life, but those of our children.
Let us make criminals. Tell them where they can reach you at.
You can reach me at yourinspiredjourney.com. That's yourinspiredjourney.com. You can also reach me by phone at 313-759-7855. Again, this is Heather Heteru, personal change coach, and you can reach me at 313-759-7855.
Right now, and this is immediate, you can reach me at calvintman.com, right? Of course, Emmy World, we're out here, Emmy Apparel. Right now, dealing with the last couple of sessions, we've had some situations that just left me in awe. And it's consistent on how destructive we are toward our own sons. And I witnessed it up close and personal. And I'm telling you right now, y'all out here talking that stuff about somebody else, and you helping. I'm saying right now, Lord, send them to me. Lord, give me the strength, the keys, the resources, so we can do more to save these babies from the hands of these people. It is astonishing to learn that what you feel and what you look at and put together, it turns out in a study to be right. And I'm frequently saying these things, and they're being backed by studies. Woo.
So I just want to end our session by making sure that people understand that we have the choice and we have the power to change what we see.
Yes.
It is up to us. We are the ones who are going to heal ourselves and solve our own problems. We have no space on the sideline.
None.
There is no space to wait for somebody else to do it. What we have to do is get enough information so that we can start right where we are. You don't have to have a PhD to do this work. You don't have to have a mental health degree to do this work. There are lots of programs. There are lots of organizations. How many organizations do we have in nonprofits?
There are 53,000, and you have less than 30 seconds.
Yeah. And so I just want to encourage you. You can do something right now today. You can change, and you can decide to change it.
Fathers, go to goodfathersonly.com and join our free membership. God bless you and encourage me. I'm young. You have been watching Put Your Family First by METV and Podcasting. Peace.